It's summer again, but unlike any other I've known. At least not since I was a snot-nosed kid and hung out every hour of the day with my brother Chris. 50 years have come and gone since then. I've packed my sea bag and my rain gear for a month of gill netting salmon on a boat out of Homer, and I'm wondering what we brothers are in for. More importantly, who we are to each other when we're around fish. It isn't that we haven't been fishing together in the last 5 decades, but it hasn't been on a boat where we're playing for keeps, for money, and our outings haven't left us in the throes of life or death. We grew up fishing the farm ponds of Minnesota, but as we rocketed through adolescence, we began to outgrow fishing as a recreational activity on Sunday afternoons. We brothers have never been much for relaxation, other than for naps between the action. As teenagers, we lugged canoes through the woods and over the hills to remote lakes to prospect for pike or for panfish. Though we often reaped the piscine rewards for our troubles, we both yearned for more adventure, more intensity. Well, we found it. Let me preface this with the fact that we brothers are not twins. Chris is 57, I'm 58. I'll leave you to theorize about the differences in personalities between firstborn and secondborn sons, but we discovered that they were complementary forces early on in our lives. We came to Alaska in the 1970s, got on commercial fishing together, but only for a year, then went our separate ways after this young woman hired me to fish salmon with her out in the Aleutians. Cheryl and I fell in love and fished the next 15 summers out west. I'll leave you to determine who caught whom. In the mid-1990s, fish prices dropped, and we all sold out of our operations, took jobs, and raised a bunch of kids. Now the kids are gone, we're bored, and we're back at sea. As for our brotherly differences, I'm the complacent one. I can get absorbed in a sunset, lost to a moonrise, and forget that we're drifting dangerously close to a shoal. I don't mind taking directions. I'm one of the deckhands, and I'm the cook on the boat this summer. Chris, he's the captain. A captain whose hunger for good fishing drives him by day and by night. Troubleshooter, mechanic, he's a fish finder, and our fearless leader. What he says goes, and he's hired brains, brawn, and talent in the form of Matt Stillman. Matt is mechanically minded, innovative, and a solution to protect himself from the summer's onslaught of jellyfish is nothing short of entertaining. So we're thrown together for the summer aboard a boat that Chris has leased. I hasten to mention that this particular boat was welded together in 1959, 3 years after I was born. If its age isn't humbling enough, the boat's named after a tiny woodland animal that stashes its nuts for winter. We're mixing it up with boats the likes of the Paycheck, the Terminator, the Mercenary. What it lacks in electronic amenities, creature comforts, or social status, however, the little chipmunk more than makes up for at the fuel pumps. In the bilges of the boat sits a little Perkins diesel engine that burns 2 gallons an hour. Other boats burn 10, 15, and even 40 gallons per hour. Of course, they are fast and can run circles around us, but it's consoling to think that we run around the inlet for about the hourly cost of a babysitter. Then again, its speed of only 7 knots and 32 feet of length make the boat more vulnerable in weather, and we wonder how she'll fare in the storms. To think of the storms is to think of friends lost at sea, and I sometimes think that chasing fish together could bring Chris and I to our ends. We've both been on boats in trouble and felt our bodies go beyond fear into that strange feeling of accepting our fate, the taste of death. Then again, who are we fooling? I've had cancer, he's had a heart attack, we both lost a lot of muscle. We know that our years are numbered, yet we never quit dreaming of having big days when we fill the boat with fish. We've had our share of them, that's for sure.
Up ahead, they were swimming hard, but the wave would lift them. You could just see their little tails working really hard, you know. So we'd go up above. I'd see like 2 or 3 or 4 schools of maybe 30, 40 fish each, and we'd go up above them and we'd lay it out.
Remember that girl that lured me away from my brother and Cook Inlet and way out west to the Aleutians? Well, there she is. I lured her out with us for what we hope will be a bountiful, glorious day at sea. That vignette that Chris is telling her is about a $24,000 day in a $200,000 season. We're hoping for a repeat of that story with the change of the next tide. And that box of cereal stowed so conspicuously for easy access? Major League Baseball players have nothing on Cook Inlet gillnetters when it comes to superstition. It was a bowl of Captain Crunch that set the tone of that huge season for Chris back in 1987. What remains murky to me, however, is when he'll use it. I have not seen him defer to his crutch of crunchy kernels since he brought it aboard, and the season hasn't been all that hot so far. As the season wears on, we have days of less than 50 fish, and some of our sets have been water hauls without a single fish. We plod on, setting and retrieving our nets. Something has got to change. As the season ticks toward its end, we keep missing out on a big day, and it begins to wear on the crew. Finally, Matt takes initiative. It is July 17th, the traditional peak day of commercial fishing in the lower inlet, and his winter's money rides on Chris's every move. There's too much at risk. He pours up a heaping cup, adds milk, and crunch-natizes our fair captain. What transpires in the next 2 hours is nothing short of miraculous. Fish hit the net like bullets, and we roll up our sleeves and get ready for a seemingly endless day of picking and icing wild sockeye salmon. And like the little animal that so aptly stores its nuts for winter, this little chipmunk can put 18,000 pounds under the hatches and in its holds. That's a lot of fish for a boat this size, and a lot of money for the coming winter. The clock flirts with 3 a.m. when we finally make it to the docks to deliver. By my calculations, we pulled nearly 27 hours straight. Never mind the loss of sleep. There will be time enough to make up for that while others take the helm when we run out for the next opener. For now, I want to bask in the warmth of a good season. Take in the smells of salt and fish. It is summer, and I'm once again a snot-nosed kid, a sibling with my brother at sea.
Hi, I'm Cindy Trabuzio. I work at the Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Juneau, Alaska. Aging and monitoring the growth of shark populations and of any fish populations is very important for stock assessment. In the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea Aleutian Islands, we primarily study the Pacific sleeper shark, the salmon shark, and the spiny dogfish. And those are our 3 main species for stock assessment. Humans should care about the fate of sharks because diversity is very, very important to the health of the entire planet. They are all uniquely evolved into their environment The diversity of sharks is actually quite astounding. And ecosystems really are like a puzzle. If you take them out of the system, the whole balance of the system changes. It's not stable anymore. The spiny dogfish is actually a shark, even though it doesn't say shark in its name. Spiny dogfish are actually generalist feeders. I've seen them feeding on jellyfish, shrimp, squid, octopus, larger fish. They're fairly common and they tend to travel in schools, but they're also only 3 feet long. They're a pretty small species. Spiny dogfish are named because they have these 2 dorsal fin spines. And the spine has an enamel gland on it that deposits this dark enamel coating, and that has an annular variation, which is what we use to count the number of years on it. It's like counting tree rings. Then there's the vertebrae, which is like a spinal column, but not quite. And the vertebrae are what we are investigating now for aging spiny dogfish. We have to dissect out the vertebrae from the animal, clean it off, trim off all the excess gunk and whatnot. Then we put it through a multiple-step staining procedure. Hematoxylin is a vibrant purple color stain, and that makes those dark bands really pop out, so they're a lot easier to catch and easier to see. And then we mount it on a slide and start examining them under the microscope, where we look for the banding pattern, start to take pictures and do image analysis on it. The tagging study has been going on for about 5 years now. What we have learned from just where the tags have released from the animals is that the dogfish are going all over the place. We've had dogfish go from basically near Dutch Harbor all the way down to off the coast of Los Angeles in under 9 months. They didn't go around the coast as we would have expected. They went across the North Pacific, out over the deep water. Clearly they're doing a lot more moving than we previously believed. This does have an impact on stock assessment because these are not just Gulf of Alaska fish, they're not just British Columbia fish, they're not just West Coast fish, they are coast-wide, and we have 3-4 very different management areas. So there's larger implications just from a management perspective. From a biological perspective, there's a lot more life history going on with these animals than we believed. Most of the animals that went for these long distance swims were larger female spiny dogfish. There's so much to learn about all these animals.
Go another direction. Day 2.5 of this storm, where they're calling for 55-mile-an-hour winds and such, some 30-foot speed. Yeah, too much for our boats for sure. Well, it's been almost 1,200 miles, and we're just a couple miles from our cabin.
Our plan is to leave these boats here at the cabin and pack raft across this Lynn Canal. It's about 7 miles to the other side. And we'll climb over these mountains through a pass, which is kind of in the clouds there, but just to the left of that prominent peak, there's a col that we hope to access through the thick forests that'll lead to the glaciers beyond.
The legendary Alaska red king crab flourished in the waters around Kodiak Island in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. It supported an unprecedented fishing boom, prompting local officials to declare Kodiak the king crab capital of the world. Crab were everywhere, and then they disappeared. The fishing boom went bust, and the fishery remains closed in Kodiak waters. The stocks failed to recover, and in 2006, researchers, fishermen, and local and industry officials began to consider enhancement of some local crab stocks through the release of hatchery-raised crab.
So once the preliminary laboratory investigations for at crab were finished, it was time to bring it out here into the field where the real releases would take place. And in order to do that, we had to do 2 preliminary studies out here. The first was to find ideal locations and good habitat to do the releases in, and the second was to actually do a small-scale release. Now, Guy Powell and others had pioneered the art of scientific diving long before we got started in here. One of the things Guy Powell found when he was doing his observations on king crab in the field is that the juveniles, which are really small, only about 2 millimeters, need specific habitat types, and in particular they need complex shells and rocks with a good covering of algae on top of it in order to hide from predators. So in order to do this type of experiment, you have to have a trained dive team. And the Kodiak Laboratory Dive Team has thousands of dives and many, many years of experience in doing this type of research around Kodiak on crabs. So we're the ones who jumped on board. The first study we had to do was to find ideal habitat, and so we set that up by going to various locations around Kodiak and doing transect lines from deep areas down about 60 feet up to about 20 feet up into shallow waters. Now this transect line is going to go through a wide variety of habitats, ideally starting in kind of muddy habitat down here, which we know isn't good, and passing up through more complex habitat as we move up into shallower depths.
10 baited traps were along the transect line to catch crab or predators. The dive plan is discussed before all dive operations, and then it is time to dive. The divers enter and descend to the transect line. The first diver takes photos adjacent to each trap along the line. The second diver follows and classifies the habitat, recording algal cover, bottom sediment composition, and also hunts for small king crab. Notes are recorded on the diver's slate. The sampling quadrat is searched for small crab. Algal cover is expressed as a percentage covering the sampling quadrat. The bottom or substrate composition is noted as a percentage of either sand, mud, gravel, shell, or rock, totaling to 100%. The dive slate has data recorded for each sampling quadrat throughout the dive. Data from each dive slate is entered into a computer spreadsheet for analysis. Crab predators are surveyed with both a net and on several dive surveys. To prepare for the upcoming experimental release, local fishermen from Akiak catch female crab in Alatak Bay. The crabs are packed in coolers with layers of seawater-soaked burlap, loaded into the plane and flown back to Kodiak. They are unloaded and transported to the Kodiak Fisheries Lab.
Nice females carrying eggs. We'll hold them here for a little bit, arrange to send them to Seward where they'll hold them until the eggs hatch, harvest the larvae, raise the larvae, send them back, and we'll put them out in the bay somewhere.
After holding the crabs to reduce handling stress, they are packed up and flown to Seward. The crab go to the Alutiiq Pride Shellfish Hatchery in Seward, Alaska. Each female has between 100,000 and 250,000 eggs, depending on her size. The eggs, which are carried for 1 year, continue to develop. They hatch into the larval stages and then develop into juveniles. They are fed and cared for with techniques developed in earlier crab research. The crab are sent to the Kodiak lab where they will be held until the release.
So once we had done the preliminary survey, we selected a spot to do the releases, and we selected Cozy Cove down near Old Harbor because it had great habitat, good complex habitat for these king crab, and was also in a nice location that was well protected from storms and currents and stuff like that. Now, the release, for the release, we wanted to do an experiment looking at how the density of the crab would affect the release success. So we went out there and divers laid out 12 of these gigantic quadrats that you see here. This is a 5 by 5 meter square quadrat. Grab that corner, swim out 5 meters, make sure it's snug.
The divers stretch out and stake down the 12 crab release quadrats on the bottom of Cozy Cove. Now they are ready for the crab. The crab are flown in from Kodiak and loaded onto the boat. The crab are unpacked and counted into jars containing the numbers specified for each of the 3 release densities. These are replicated 3 times along with 3 controls with no crab released. The crab are transported in jars to the release quadrats and dispersed onto the bottom. To monitor the crab after release, one diver searches for crab in each of 3 randomly placed sample quadrats inside the larger release quadrat. The second diver does the same for 3 quadrats along a randomly selected side to check for crab movements. This was to be done on a regular schedule in the days and weeks after the release. Unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond the dive team's control, the planned post-release monitoring surveys were interrupted and delayed for a month, disrupting the experiment.
Now, even after that long period of time, we were still able to find crabs down here, but they weren't at high enough densities that we were able to say anything significant about the results. So it was, the whole release was a success in that we perfected the methods. We were able to put the crabs out here and still find them almost 2 months after we did the release. But unfortunately, we didn't answer the question that we'd hoped to answer, which was how density was going to affect release success. But fortunately, we plan to continue to do these types of releases in order to perfect our understanding of whether or not this crab enhancement will be a viable option for Alaska's future.
For me, the most brilliant part of the year is right now when salmon are running up these rivers. And when salmon come into Sitka, like this amazing gift that comes to us from the far reaches of the ocean. My name is Richard Nelson. I'm a radio producer and I'm fascinated with everything about nature. I think salmon are one of the most perfect animals on Earth. Maybe they're the most perfect animal on Earth. First of all, they're incredibly abundant if you take care of the places where they live and spawn. Second, they come in and they feed the natural community here. They're fundamental to the richness and diversity of nature along the whole Pacific coast of North America, and today especially here in Alaska, because they're still as abundant as ever. Third, salmon are a miracle because they show us how life works. They come in, they spawn, they all die together, their young are born, their young go back out into the ocean, and a year or 2 or 3 or 5 later they come back. They show us how life on Earth works. And finally, salmon are a perfect organism because they're delicious. They're nutritious. They're just this lavish, abundant food that comes to us. Where is there another animal anywhere on Earth that does what salmon do in such abundance and such fundamental importance to our way of life and to our economies in Alaska. Salmon are perfect.
My name's Charlie Wilbur, and this is the beginning of my 34th season fishing. The salmon are an icon of Alaska. Well, for one, it just tastes terrific and it's a healthy food. We're very fortunate that we live right in the middle of salmon producing country here. The Tlingit people here have been eating salmon for thousands of years. The Russians actively participated in procuring salmon. So salmon's a big part of our history here and the economy here, not only just for the fishermen, but for the crew members, for the people that supply the boats. All fishermen have quite a bit invested in the fishery. You know, I feel pretty fortunate that we're able to enjoy it and to make a living at it.
The last big totem pole I did down in Totem Park has a female near the base. There's a male and female salmon on either side of her, and that was symbolizing the two sides to the park with a river running through it and the salmon returning to the stream every year. My name's Tommy Joseph. I'm from here in Sitka, Alaska. I first got into carving in 1972. I was in the 3rd grade. I had a gentleman come to my school demonstrating wood carving for a week. I got to sit with him and make one of what he was making, and that was my start. The arts are, I don't want to say overwhelming, but there's a lot of arts going on as far as, you know, sing and dance and performing arts and then the visual arts and carving also. Yeah, that's wood carving. A totem pole is a visual tool for telling a story. Salmon is a huge part of the story here in Alaska every year. I mean, right now we have salmon at the mouth of all these creeks and streams and beginning to head up the river. It's just part of the life cycle here, and it's an amazing thing to see and have happen every year, and it never gets old. There's so many ways that we use salmon in our art.
A long time ago, some 28, 29 years ago, a family from Seattle came up to start a store, and they talked to some fishermen and my name came up and I was hired, second person hired here. I had to learn it all, but oh, what a ride. It's been amazing, yes. We have a slogan up on the board that says, consider us a part of your crew. And we really stand by that. So we cater to the fishermen. I really believe that the fishing industry, the salmon industry in Sitka is Sitka. When you walk downtown, you'll see the art, you'll see the different displays. I don't think anyone could possibly be thinking that this was something other than a fishing community. I think all of the businesses, I'm just trying to think of, you know, the mechanics in town, the people who construct things for the fishing industry. The restaurants, the grocery stores, my goodness, if you just go to the grocery store and see how they're filling up those carts. I mean, we have tourism, we have other things, and all those things bring in a lot of money, but my luck is that we are a fishing community.
Really, my favorite part was whenever I'm talking to the kids and like if I ask them a question and immediately they're just like, bam, I know this, I know what you're talking about, I totally get it.
Chum, sockeye, king, silver, pink.
So a lot of the kids have a pretty good background in understanding what fish hatcheries do. I think that really credit is due to the school systems because they really do a good job of teaching the kids the salmon life cycle. You learn it in elementary school, you go over it a lot, you get to visit hatcheries. I know the third graders go out to Medviji hatchery, so they kind of understand what's going on, but we try and reiterate, why hatcheries do what they do.
And you have to find a male and a female, both in the same color.
Usually when I do a thing with younger kids, you got to keep running or you're in trouble, right? So we do things that are exercise, like the Salmon Olympics we had over there. I somehow or another invented that because I was supposed to do something, but I didn't know what, and we didn't have any live salmon, so we had to use water balloons instead. When you learn about a subject, whatever subject it is, the more you learn in depth, I think the more you learn to appreciate it, right? Whether it's art or history or a community or a culture or whatever, but it's certainly true in science.
Hemlock and Sitka spruce and other native vegetation like salmon berries, devil's club. And then just a little ways up the river here, we're going to get right by the river. You may have the opportunity to see salmon.
Day 17. Our travel through the Inside Passage continues. Every day I'm more amazed at the bountiful wildlife. Every day I'm more amazed at the incredible
Okay, you guys get ready. Coming up on them now. There's bait right up ahead.
This is my home. I grew up paddling all this coast, and it's just really magical. You can see this whole island is just kind of this magical place in general. So I feel super lucky that I get to work on this project. Just get this really unique experience of getting to be out on the colony with these birds. You're in this, this boundary environment with these animals that have become almost completely marine in their way of life, but they're still so tied to land. MPRB has been really on the forefront of doing these really huge ecosystem-wide projects where they take an important fishery like pollock or the groundfish fishery in the Gulf and really address that one resource from a lot of different angles at all aspects of the ecosystem with the focus on these groundfish. A lot of these species need the near-shore environment, so the coastal environment, and so that's usually the nursery habitat for their young, and then the young have to make it to the ocean to grow big so that we can harvest them. I'm working with rhinoceros auklets. Rhinos use the near-shore environment to find food for their chicks and for themselves. The same habitat that is thought to be this nursery for these groundfish species. A lot of this monitoring work like that the Fish and Wildlife Service does, and kind of what this project is investigating a little bit more in depth, is to use seabirds in this tight coupling with their food source to have a gauge for how the marine environment is doing. And currently a lot of that is looking at reproductive success, so how successfully they're raising those chicks. We want to know, what the birds are bringing back for their chicks. What are the adults eating? Where are the adults going to get this food? And sort of these questions that are going to enable us to determine kind of a little bit about what is out there and what's available for these small fish. So I spend my nights trapping rhinos, either to deploy tags or to retrieve tags. And then one night a week I do adult diet sampling. The chick diet is super easy because rhinos are a lot like puffins and murres, where they come in with a large load of fish for their chicks. One of the cool things about working on an integrated ecosystem research project is that I'm not just researching in a bubble. Doing this in tandem with things like the shipboard work that's going on, I hear about what's being seen on their surveys. So when the ship was sampling in Sitka Sound, they were finding hardly any forage fish. And so this absence of these really key forage fish species says a lot about what my birds are bringing back, because there's been a huge absence of those species in the bill loads this summer. It's such a cool window into the world, and sort of having this puzzle of trying to figure out what the birds are telling us about this world that we can only see such a small piece of. Almost every night I, at least once, just think, I'm really lucky.
Second day, and we have learned how to start the boat, and
it's interesting. It's full of surprises.
I'm getting gray hairs. No, it's good. It's like we're learning a lot of promise. That sounds awesome.
And that's going on. Today is the day we're launching the boats. Panicked a little bit this morning. Still panicking.
A month before you were born, I was 8 months pregnant, you were in a boat and I was cooking salmon.
And that's the first fish I caught.
Those are probably the first fish you caught.
And we're away.
And now you are running your own boat.
Got our first fish of the season! Got a big smooch. Uncle Mike. Mwah. Go make us some babies for the future! I never really believed I could do it until I was doing it. I just thought, well, I'll have to learn. I won't really have any other options. I'll just have to learn. Sonar, how's it going?
It's been going great. We just caught 11 fish. There was times when it was hard. There were times when we just weren't catching a lot of fish, and it was hard to keep going.
Stress, sleep deprivation. I remember there was a night when these weird clunking noises, my fuel got clogged, I blew a hydro hose, and I filled my bilge with coolant, and there just wasn't a lot of sleep, and I had lost perspective.
Then there was times when the sun is shining and the fish are hitting your net, and you just look around and you're like, is this really my job? Is this is awesome.
I love salmon. I love the way they feel. I love the way they taste. I love the lifestyles and communities they create. And they've taught me responsibility and hard work and how to push my own limits. And they've given me education, the opportunity to run my own boat, my own business. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful for salmon.